Today is Thursday, Chof Shvat, Tavshenayin Gimel. We are in Teres Menachem Seir from Mamar Vayomer Aleph Tavshen Beis, in the middle of the Mamar of Shabbos Pashas Achrei, Mamar Vayomer Erev Rosh Chodesh Iyar Tavshen Yud Aleph. The beginning of the Mamar is Vayomer Yehonoson Mochor Chodesh, and we are on page Samachtes at chapter 5, Ois Hey. A few comments on yesterday's shiur. First of all, we were talking about the two opinions concerning what type of tree it was that Moshe Rabbeinu threw into the water. The Zohar says it was an Eitz HaChaim. The Medrash says it was a tree called Hidufni. I mentioned that there were three opinions. Indeed, there are three opinions concerning in the Medrash as well. I believe it's also concerning Arava for Sukkot, but concerning this tree, also there are three opinions, whether it was a willow tree, whether it was a olive tree, or whether it was the Hidufni tree. And I have a photo here from the Hidufni tree, and you can see why according to some opinions it would be an Arava, because the leaves are similar to a willow. It's called oleander, or another name for it, I think, is Nerium. You can look it up yourself on the internet. It is poisonous. Every part of this tree is poisonous, toxic. It can have gastric effects. It can even have cardiac effects. You can read up on it. Bottom line, the common denominator of all the three trees. Avron asked yesterday, why does the Rebbe specifically choose the one that says that it was poisonous? The point being that each of those are bitter trees. But the Hidufni
tree, oleander, this one?
Olive
and
willow.
Okay.
As opposed to the Eitz HaChaim. Those three are the opinions of the Medrash.
Right.
The Zohar says that it was an Eitz HaChaim. Of course, the Eitz HaChaim, we know there are different opinions whether it was some kind of a fruit tree. So obviously it has the point being that it has some sweetness to it, right? Whereas all of these, in the most pronounced form, obviously in this tree, in the Hidufni, oleander, the idea of the bitterness is expressed to the greatest extent. So that's why the Rebbe chooses this particular one out of the three. But the point being that according to the Medrash, it was tasteless and even bitter, right? And the Rebbe used this as an explanation to explain the third method of interacting with the Ra. We spoke about this, the difference. One level is iskafia, bending. Then there is ishapcha, transformation, and in ishapcha itself there are two types of transformation. One is that the cheshach, the Ra, let's use the terms, is replaced with Ur, overwhelmed with Ur. So it's not that the cheshach itself, from its own perspective, becomes Ur, becomes light. It's not that the Ra itself is revealed as something which is not Ra, but rather it's the Ur that affects it in that way. Then there's the higher level of his hapcha, where the Ra itself, the darkness itself, is transformed to light. The Rebbe is going to flesh it out more in Avodas Hashem. So he used this episode of the Mara of the bitter waters with Moshe Rabbeinu throwing in the tree. So there are three methods of sweetening the water.
For your sake, how do you, by throwing something at least as bitter as the water?
We'll get to that, yeah.
Okay.
So one way of sweetening water is by pouring in sweet water into the bitter water, and that way you're diluting the bitter water, but you're also diluting the sweet water, right? Then there is a way of sweetening the water through throwing in something which is bitter, basically using that as let's put it this way, the significance of throwing in a bitter tree or a poisonous tree into the water is basically to reveal in the waters themselves the fact that they're bitter, that it's negative, and that it's not as it should be. And then the Ra itself, the negative itself, is Nisayr, it becomes awakened with a desire to leave its undesirable state. The Rebbe is going to flesh it out now in Avodas Hashem. In Sfiris, in levels of godliness, we're talking about, in the highest level of Ishapcha that we're talking about over here, that the Ra itself, from its own perspective, comes to the realization that it's not the way it should be and it should change. That is the revelation of Stimbul Kol Stimin, Yoshas Cheshach Sisrei, Helem Ha'atzmi. Those were the terms that have been used. The essential concealment. In other words, you're talking about the presence of the very essence of Hashem, the very essence of Ein Sof, which is not, when it becomes present, it's not in a way of Gilui, because Gilui denotes a descent from his essence. In other words, his essence is not revealable, so to speak. But when his essence becomes present and one becomes aware of his presence, the term used is galus, that causes the Ra to recognize that it itself, from its own perspective, should change. The Rebbe is going to flesh it out now in more words. This is going to be a process of going through this stage by stage, part by part, and then hopefully at the end it'll become clear. Let's start. Hey, page Samachtes. To explain this in Avodas Adam, in man's service to Hashem, the Hinik Siv, it says at the pasuk in Melachim, Chai Hashem Elikei Yisrael Asher Amadati Lefonav. This is it talks about this difference. I mean, I don't want to go to the whole long discussion, but it's a pasuk which either Eliyahu Hanavi said or Elisha Hanavi said. There are two psukim. This one, I believe, refers to the one that Eliyahu Hanavi said. So he said to King Achav, you can look up the story there in Tanakh. The bottom line is that the pasuk is saying, Chai Hashem, live. So as Hashem lives, Elikei Yisrael, Asher Amadati Lefonav, before whom I stood. What does this mean? Elikei Yisrael, before whom I stood. It means to say that there is in the neshama the level of the neshama as it stands before Hashem, and then there is the level of the neshama, the state of the neshama as it comes down into a guf, into a body down here. So what does this pasuk refer to? This is a reference to the neshama as it is above, before it comes down, descends into the body. In what state is the neshama there? Shemaseges elikus, the neshama comprehends godliness, and is in a constant state of love and fear of Hashem. And it knows nothing at all about any other matters, zulas elikus, outside of God and godliness. That is the state of the neshama as it is above before it comes down into the body. However, when the neshama comes down below, to clothe itself in a body and into the animal soul, it becomes already attached to human intellect, to comprehend a physical matter, even lower than a physical matter, meaning chumrius, even coarse matters, materialistic matters, through the fact that the neshama comes down into the body, a concealment takes place. In what way? There are two dimensions to the concealment that happens when the neshama comes down into the body. Ha'alef, number one, shahaguf ma'ilim alei neshama. First of all, the body covers up, conceals the light of the neshama. V'habeis hu helam aguf atzmei. The second one is the concealment of the body itself. The body itself is a concealment, even without the neshama. What does this mean? Just by way of a short preface, there is light and there is darkness. When there is no light, what is there? It's dark. Is darkness the opposite of light? Or is darkness itself an entity? Is darkness something which exists in the absence of light? Or is darkness itself a creation? An entity? So, precisely, created darkness. In fact, concerning Cheshach, it says Uvere Cheshach, and we know that when we talk about Bria, rather than Yitzirah, Bria is the first point of creation. So Cheshach, clearly, according to the pasuk, which is according to the bracha, which is actually a pasuk. The Chayshach is a creation. In fact, if you look at what it says in the Torah, what happened on the first day? Bereshis bara l'kim es Hashemayim v'ha'aretz v'ha'aretz v'sayu v'vayu v'chayshach al pnei sahim. Light wasn't even created yet, and already there's a reference to what? To darkness. In fact, when you look at the narrative of the entire Sheshis and Bereshis, it says Vahi erev, Vahi boker. Right? That's a little bit of less of a proof. But the bottom line is, al pi Torah, darkness is a creation. It's not just the absence of light.
But it is that as well.
Precisely. So there are two dimensions to darkness. There's the darkness as it is an absence of light, and there's darkness as an entity in itself. These are the two nekudas that he said, the points that he makes concerning the goof.
So is it possible there could be two types of darkness, like there's aura gunners and like aura that we have?
Yes.
There could be different.
Yes. Yes. Ultimately, somehow they're linked together. But if you start dissecting it, there are dimensions to it, right? And therefore, in the transformation of the darkness, there are also two dimensions. As he says over here, one is, I'm just jumping a little bit, one is where the light pushes away the darkness, and the other one where the darkness itself becomes an entity of positivity. I'm not using the exact words, but these are the just to use words that separates the notions, the ideas. Let's see how the Rebbe spells it out. So there are two dimensions to the goof. The goof relative to the neshama is like darkness relative to light, right? So there are two aspects to the goof. One is that the goof conceals the light of the neshama. That's one concealment. Eir and cheshach as they're linked. And then there's the helam haguf atzmei. The goof itself as an entity of concealment, irrespective of the neshama. Veheim beiza inyanim she'eshna mecheshach. These are the two aspects that there are in darkness. The first one is hayosei heder ha'er, the fact that light, that darkness is the absence of light. And the second aspect of hayosei bria b'fnei atzma, the fact that darkness is a creation, a creature on its own, in its own right. V'hainu. What is now going back to the neshama and the guf? Shehahel l'malei neshama. When we say that the guf, the body, conceals the light of the neshama, hu inyan heder ha'er. In that sense, we're talking about darkness as the absence of light. Then there's vehelam haguf atzmei, the concealment of the body itself. Hu inyan sha'cheshech hu bria b'fnei atzma. That's the idea that the darkness is a creature in its own right. What is now that Rebbe dissects it even further? The hine. Heder ha'er, when we say the term the absence of light, shayich, this is only relevant, this is only possible, rak kisheyesh mitzvah shel. When you say that darkness is the absence of light, that necessitates, automatically, necessarily means that there is light, right? There must be light, and when the light is absent, there's darkness. When you say that the darkness is the absence of light, so it's joined by the hip to the light, meaning to say that when there is light, there is no darkness, and when there's darkness, and when the light leaves, there is darkness. Then cheshech, darkness, has the ability to affect the situation in a way of the absence of light. Or the darkness can weaken or make the light be obscured. Right? So, in other words, they work together. Move on. I got a second one. Move on. From the fact that we say that when you... Are you not with us or what?
I'm stuck to the beginning of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
Go on.
you've got a pasuk here which comes from Elisha or Eliyahu.
Yeah.
So you've got. I don't understand how he dashes this out from the pasuk. I mean, it's such a general kind of a pasuk.
No, the pasuk only comes along to say that there is a difference in the neshama, the way it stands before Hashem, and the neshama, the way it comes down into the body. That's all he's saying from the pasuk. Asher omadati lefonav. There is the state of the neshama as it stands before God, which is different from the state of the neshama as it comes down into the body. Now, from the pasuk, we don't know what the difference is. he goes on to explain in what difference is there. Where is the difference? So he explains that the neshama, the way it stands before Hashem, without the body, without being connected to the materialistic world, it's pure neshama, pure godliness, right? And therefore, in what state is it? It knows nothing else. All it knows is, what's its frame of reality? Godliness, God. So its seichel is a godly seichel, its awareness is a godly awareness, its love is a godly love, its fear is a god. It's all in the context of God. In other words, there is no helam v'hester. There are no outside influences that interfere with the neshama's connection to Hashem. When it descends into the body, there's concealment. In what way is there concealment? Two ways. Number one, the fact that the body is the darkness that conceals the aspect of darkness that conceals light, the absence of light. So it's right. Then there is the aspect of the body itself, which is a metzius of chayshech, an existence of darkness, an entity of darkness, irrespective of its connection to the neshama. Right? From the fact that we say that now, when we say that darkness is the absence of light, that proves that you can't say that the guf is merely the absence of a neshama. Why? Because the guf itself was a creation. In fact, the guf was created, the guf of man was created, the body of man was created before the neshama. God took Ofam in Adama, right? And he turned it made a guf. And then what does it say? Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. In fact, that's one of the differences between the bria of the person and all other creatures. All other creatures, the neshama and the guf was created together. Vayomer elikim yi'ir, Vayomer elikim tachia ha'oretz, and so on and so forth, right? So the utterance of Hashem created the guf and the neshama. It came to the guf and the neshama of the person. What happened? He made a body, and then he made a soul, and then he joined them together. What does that mean? That the guf is not only a metzius of heder ha'ir, heder ha'neshama, the guf is a metzius in its own. So in the most pronounced way, when we talk about chayshech being a creature of it on its own, right? It's most pronounced where? In the guf. So the point being that in the guf there's two dimensions. The fact that it conceals the neshama, and the fact that it itself is an entity of concealment. An entity of non-revelation. From this it's understood that the guf itself cannot, that the concealment of the body cannot just be the absence of light. Why should it? Because the forming of the body preceded the forming of the neshama. Okay, we're going to stop here. We'll carry on Mitzvah tomorrow. Just a couple of words, no Inyan. Carry on Mitzvah tomorrow.